Occupational therapists often work one person at a time, but what happens when we step back and examine the systems that are shaping participation in entire populations? Welcome to the Evolve Living podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Josie Jarvis, a US based occupational therapist practicing across the lifespan as an advocacy and policy informed clinician. I currently work in home health, but I've experienced practicing across settings, including schools, outpatient pediatrics, acute care, skilled nursing, memory care, and orthopedic same day joint replacement procedures. And really, this podcast grew out of those experiences, along with returning to school in 2019 at the University of Utah post-professional clinical doctorate program, where I got deeper exposure to the field and discipline of occupational science. This all began during the COVID-19 pandemic, when many clinicians felt the tension between what patients needed and what systems allowed. I started this show to explore that tension and to ask how occupational science might help us understand the patterns shaping participation beyond individual cases alone. Around the same time, I was contributing to a chapter with Occupational Therapies Without Borders textbook third edition, examining critical theory perspectives on barriers within conventional academic publishing and formal academic conferences, particularly how institutional systems shape whose knowledge is recognized in rehabilitation scholarship and how it is disseminated across the globe with many barriers of access for field clinicians and the clients that receive our services. As that work evolved, these conversations began to move beyond academic journals and textbooks and into more public virtual spaces. The chapter ended up evolving beyond the textbook and will be featured here on the Substack and other spaces online. One of these projects is now the Occupational Science Alphabet Series, which begins with the concept of occupational apartheid, an idea that participation in everyday life can be restricted by social, political, and economic systems, and not simply by individual clinical and pathological impairments alone. That lens reminds us that many barriers our clients face are structural. They're shaped by policy, history, and access to resources. If you'd like to explore these ideas further, the Occupational Science Alphabet Series is currently being shared on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and soon to be LinkedIn. I've also made several entry-level occupational science resources freely available, including the Occupational Science 101 Guide, materials from my doctoral capstone course on the foundations of occupational science and its relationship to occupational therapy practice framework 4th edition. These resources can be found in the description below or at engage.evolvelivingnetwork.com. You can also follow this podcast through the Josie Jarvis OT Substack, where new episodes and related reflections will be shared. After airing the last episode in fall of 2024, I intentionally paused the podcast for a season to focus on field research and professional work. Over this past month, I got to present at the World Occupational Science Day with the Canadian Society for Occupational Scientists, where I got to meet today's guest. And next month, I'll be presenting research with Dr. Gian Jones, exploring the transformative power of collective occupations, including hip-hop culture and social justice quilting as mechanisms for critical knowledge translation and public advocacy for occupational therapy informed by occupational science. Because ultimately, I believe in something simple, that occupational science cannot live only in academic journals and luxury in-person conferences. They must live in homes, clinics, community spaces, and policy conversation. And that brings us to today's guest. Emmanuel Poma Bodhi. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Is a researcher working at the intersection of occupational science, epidemiology, biostatistics, rehabilitation, and disability studies. His work examines how disease patterns, health disparities, and social systems shape participation, using rigorous data-driven approaches focused on marginalized and underserved populations. At the heart of his work is a commitment to ensuring that knowledge moves between people and not just within institutions. And that bridge between field practice, population health, and data science is exactly why this conversation matters. Emmanuel, welcome. I'm so excited to learn more about your work. I'm wondering, could you help introduce us with a little bit of information about your own personal cultural context and how your interests drove you into collaborating with occupational scientists, where I believe you now sit as one of the board members for the Canadian Society for Occupational Scientists, where we met. So
Yeah.
excited to learn more about your work today.
That's great. That's great. Thank you very much. And I really appreciate it. First of all, my background had to do with disability and rehabilitation studies, which I did for my undergraduate studies at the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology in Ghana. So prior to that, I also served as the president for the Ghana Association of Disability and Rehabilitation Students. And I also serve as a teaching and research assistant during my program. So coming to speak concerning how I got connected with occupational scientists, it was when after the undergraduate studies, I was trying to get an application to do my master's. And I love occupational science because it has a certain connection with disability studies, where we try to understand the environment, try to understand the work system of people, trying to look at the intersection of race, and then also make sure that everybody is able to come into that equity state and not just equality. So it was through that when I was doing my research, trying to find out which supervisor to work with, and I got connected with Dr. Lin Shaw. So that's how we got connected. And unfortunately, due to one or two reasons, I couldn't start. After that, I had to now do epidemiology and apply biostatistics because I'm good when it comes to data analysis. When it comes to being member of the board for the Canadian Society of Occupational Scientists, I believe that I think it's because I love work, I like research, and whenever Prof. Lynn or Prof. Shaw will ask for any recommendation, will ask for anybody to come with an idea, she will invite me. We have a meeting, and I'm always there, sometimes even there before the time because I love to work. And through that, she asked, "Why don't you join us on the board?" I'm like, "Yeah, that'll be a very great opportunity." My only issue was the fact that I'm in Ghana, and I was trying to think about how I'll be able to connect that with Canada. But she said they are good to go if I'm ready to work. I'm like, "Yeah, I'm ready to go." And I think so far we work on some articles. When it comes to the abstract presentation, that was my second time that I've been doing an abstract presentation at the COSOS conference. So that was my second time. And that's how we are here, trying to keep on doing the best that we can. Thank you.
Of course, I love it. And I was doing a little bit of research before this to notice that Ghana is one of the international leaders when it comes to looking at epidemiology
Yeah,
research. And
yeah,
it sounds Ghana has helped contribute significantly to wellness outcomes worldwide. Do you mind
very
sharing a
true.
little bit with the audience about what is epidemiology? And I think a lot of us, right, if you're listening to this podcast, odds are we are kind of survivors of the COVID
Yeah,
19
yeah,
pandemic. And
yeah,
I know many of us also grew up amid the AIDS epidemic internationally, that
yeah,
I know that particularly impacted
very true.
Africa. Could you share a little bit about epidemiology?
Very true. Thank you very much. So first of all, we need to understand what epidemiology is. So basically, when you speak about epidemiology, we are looking at the distribution and the determinant of health events or diseases or even health issues, where we try to understand the root cause of problem. And when you look into epidemiology, you cannot speak about epidemiology without speaking about John Snow. So in the olden days, we remember that John Snow, who is seen to be the father of epidemiology, there was a cholera outbreak. And during those times, there were nothing like any knowledge to know organisms. There was nothing like germs. There was nothing like bacteria, viruses. They didn't know anything about that. And they didn't have the machines that were going to help them to identify this stuff. But what John Snow did was very amazing. He drew a map of the community. He decided to find out where there have been high prevalence of cholera, try to map out people that are experiencing cholera, and he realized that those that are experiencing cholera on the map, it was as a result of a certain water body that was close to them. And you also realize that when you look at the map, places that are closer to those that are having high rate of cholera, they tend to also have high rates of cholera. And those that are far from those places, they don't have cholera. Then through that, he was able to tell that the reason for the cholera was because of the water that was connected to those with the high cholera rate. And that is epidemiology. So basically, epidemiology at the start had to look at trying to understand the root cause of issues, trying to understand an intersection of the environment and human behavior. That's all that epidemiology is about. So we have a man by the name John Grant who, aside what John Snow did, he came, why don't we quantify what we are saying? Okay, so John Snow believed that, well, there's cholera outbreak here because I can see that the water is what is causing the issue. John Grant goes, okay, why don't we use a number to quantify what you are saying? And that's where we had biostatistics. So now when you speak about biostatistics, we are looking at how to use numbers to make interpretations, how to speak with numbers, and it has to do with living things. That's why we have biology and statistics. So when you come to Ghana, especially the Sub-Sahara, you realize that we are so much into epidemiology because we believe it is the backbone of public health. Because when you look at the difference between medicine and you look at that compared to public health, you would realize for medicine, they are just concerned about diagnosing the issue, giving you the treatment, finding out the etiology of the cause of the issue, and they are looking at you getting better. But when you come to the epidemiology, we go to the people, we go to the community, we try to find out, okay, this is the root cause of the issue, and what can we do to make sure that this doesn't happen again? And that's how come epidemiology has been very good when it comes to Ghana and especially in Africa. And whenever there's an outbreak of maybe a pandemic, maybe an epidemic, it is very important for epidemiologists to come in because they are able to track per a map to find out what is the root cause of the issue. And they are not just looking at you, the person. They are looking at your environment. They are looking at your behavior. They are looking at the things that you are doing, intersecting at the same time. And that's the reason why this course is very important and epidemiology and bias is very important, even for Ghana, and for which reason we are driving force when it comes to Africa. Yeah.
I love this. And I think that epidemiology and public health, it really makes clear how important it is to relate to science as
Yeah.
inherently an interdisciplinary exercise,
Yeah.
one that requires intentional collaboration across
Yeah.
providers worldwide and
Yeah.
particularly across borders. Because what
Yeah.
I'm hoping is what we've all learned from the COVID-19 pandemic is that viruses and environmental disasters, including climate crisis impacts,
Exactly. Yeah.
don't really care about our institutional borders or makeup.
That's
It's
the
something
true.
we all have common cause to understand, like what you said, the root cause and almost more
Yeah.
the basic science perspective on
Yeah.
how social determinants of health
Yeah.
intersect with each other. And this is
Very
what I will
sure.
share too with just the audience as an occupational therapy clinician that has been evolving my lens for scientific practice beyond the individual level to
Yeah.
include our relationship to public health, to share some gratitude with occupational scientists internationally, to
Yeah.
include Dr. Lynn Shaw and her leadership in
Yeah.
Canada. We also have
Yeah.
Anne Wilcock, Gail Whiteford, Claire Hawking in the Australian context. Manuel
Yeah.
and I have been having conversations about Dr. Frank Kronberg and Alwani
That's true.
Ramagundo's and Nick
That's true.
Pollard's work. Many OTPs in the United States are unaware of occupational science having a robust foundation for occupational therapy's role in having interdisciplinary conversations from
Yeah.
public health and collaborating with researchers also from other disciplines. What I think would be a really helpful thing to also explore in your awareness of disability studies, occupational science, and epidemiology, it sounds like you're exploring on the cutting edge too about just how we go about collecting
Yeah.
public health
Yeah.
data and utilizing an
Yeah.
occupational and disability lens. Can you share a
Yeah.
little bit about how you've been incorporating all these different lenses in the work you're doing right now, including utilizing AI?
All right, thank you very much. That's a very good question. You realize when it comes to disability, according to the World Health Organization, we believe that everybody has some form of disability. The reason is that there are some that we don't see. And we believe that there is nothing like normal. There are something that when you do, you have difficulties in doing that because you have a certain form of disability when it gets to that. Now, in combining that to occupational science, you see, when you look at occupational science, you are trying to understand the work environment, you are trying to understand job, you are trying to understand people living in a way that their standard of living is high. Now, when there's an intersection of power and there's an intersection of race where people are being treated because of their race in a certain way, and people in high power are trying to take advantage of people in low power. What happens is that all the policies they put in place, all the things that they do, they can lead you into getting some form of disability. That's the first thing. Now, how will we understand what is the root cause of this? How will we know, okay, we know that this is what is happening, but why is it happening? We have to go to epidemiology. How can we quantify? Because in speaking, you need evidence. Now, you can't just say that, okay, somebody is experiencing an issue because of maybe what people that are in high power positions are doing. We wouldn't really take it as a strong evidence because you are not quantifying it. But what if you say, okay, out of a population, this number of people are experiencing this because of that? Now you've been able to quantify, you have a strong evidence to adjust your case. And that is the reason why there's a need to connect these three to make sure that we are all having a good way when it comes to living. And just as you said, for instance, climate condition is not really a respecter of international boundaries because there are certain diseases and issues that come as a result of the climate. And when it happens, it cuts across everywhere. Now, in connecting this to AI, people believe that AI has come to take the word of humans and come to take the work of humans and to make sure that humans are not able to do anything. But I strongly believe that AI, the concept of AI, cannot overcome the concept of clarity when it comes to human reasoning. So I see AI as a support system. I don't see it as something that replaces what humans say because AI is not able to look at the real world, what is happening. AI just look at the data that you are giving to it and the instructions that you are giving to it. So AI is limited. It's just looking at what instruction you are telling it to do at a specific period of time. And it's going to answer you per that specific instruction that you are giving. But when you get the output of the AI, the reasoning, the critical thinking, trying to understand what it's going to say, the interpretation, AI cannot do that. It will give you something, it will give you a statement, but that is not the exact thing when it comes to human materialization and human manifestation. And that's why I believe that AI is just a support system. You give it
Somewhat
the
like
prompt.
assistive technology. It's like an assistive.
Exactly. Exactly like an assistive technology. It is supposed to assist you. It doesn't replace you. So even as you use AI, there has to be accountability. There has to be transparency. You have to make sure you understand what you are doing. For instance, if you give AI a data and you ask it to analyze the data, can tell, okay, the p-value of the data is maybe 0.01. Maybe it is statistically significant, but then that doesn't mean you are right when it comes to interpretation. It is just working with what you give to it, which is different from you bringing it to the real world. I always tell people that when it comes to AI, they should just see AI as something that is just going to help and assistive technology. But then the clarity, the cognitive thinking, that is the key word. AI is able to do that cognitive thinking, that cognitive manifestation, that cognitive understanding that relies with the humans and not AI. Thank you.
Yeah, wonderful. I'm so curious your perspective as well. I'm reminded I got to go to a conference in Vancouver, Canada, a couple years
Okay.
ago. I think it might have been in 2022. I think it was the first World Occupational Science Conference. And there they hosted, I wish I could remember their name, but the keynote speaker, their work connected quite a bit to, I think, looking at how We went about, like, obviously developing the vaccine internationally. And I know here in the United
Okay.
States, I live in Washington State, which is pretty close
Okay.
to Seattle, Washington, which is
Okay.
where the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has
Mm,
been operationalizing now. The Melinda Gates Foundation is like
okay.
separated. And but I do know that Bill Gates throughout my lifespan here has been very invested, I believe, in epidemiology specifically and looking at malaria intervention. I actually think it's such a missed opportunity for OTs because he was very focused on toileting, like toileting
Oh,
challenges and whatnot. And I do a lot of work with the pelvic health occupational therapy community in the United States. But this research, I remembered like the conversation that they left us off with at the World Occupational Science Conference was that in many ways, our biomedical infrastructure, it's like they got an A in their science courses, but almost like an
okay.
F in their ethics courses.
Wow.
I think one of the things that we can think about and maybe hopefully learn from our response collectively to the COVID-19 pandemic. And I know that Frank Cronenberg has also been encouraging me to get more socio-political literacy of the AIDS pandemic throughout Africa, the continent of Africa, right? I think that it's worth us exploring. Obviously, there's a lot of concerns about ethics as it relates to AI,
Yeah.
but with
Yeah.
epidemiology, I think what I love about your work and incorporating an occupational science perspectives, the important that there is in integrating both the biomechanical and STEM science perspective with the social science considerations and ethics and
Yeah.
humanism as it relates to, for example, I'm a nonlinear processor first, so thanks for journeying with me.
Okay.
But where
Okay.
they said that maybe we got an F in ethics as it related
Mhm.
to the COVID-19 vaccine, connected with disparities in which continents really got systemic access to the COVID-19 vaccine, and additionally, seeking to commercialize parts of the vaccine in relationship to capitalism and industry, which ended up becoming a barrier to responding to epidemiology crisis. I'm curious if you
Yeah.
can share about how you integrate both socio-political lenses on epidemiology along with the STEM perspectives on
Yeah.
epidemiology.
All right. Thank you very much. Ethics, that's a very important concept. When you look back to history and you try to understand research when it comes to ethics, you realize that ethics has been an issue way back in the system. For instance, there is this study that's called the Tuskegee studies, where certain researchers believe that certain people had syphilis and they knew that they had syphilis, but they, even along the way, they developed the medicine, they had the vaccine, but they didn't give it to them. And they informed them that they had bad blood and they didn't tell them they had syphilis. So these people, they were married, so they had children. And as a result of that, most of them died. Their children got affected. Even their wife died, and some of their children died. And all these are part of ethics because there wasn't informed consent. They weren't speaking about the truth. They were lied to. And in a way, they were taking advantage of all in the name of studies. If you look at that alone, you can even look at the Nuremberg Code, which has to do with, I think World War One or World War Two, where people were prisoners were used for experiments without even their permission to do it. So you realize that when it comes to research and ethics, it has always been an issue. Now, just that there are times that there's something that we call the Horton effect. And when you speak about the Horton effect, simply let's say that, okay, I'm trying to look at, let's say, people when it comes to their sanitation. And as I want to look at if they wash their hands before they eat. And I tell them that, hey, you know what, I'm having a study and I'm going to look at how you wash your hand before you eat. Now, the moment they know that, what they will do is that they will always wash their hands, not because they have been doing it, but because you've told them that is what you are doing. And as a result of that, your data will be biased because they are doing things because they know that this is what you're observing from them. But not naturally, that is not because it is their neutral way of doing things. It would have been different if you were, okay, hey, I'm trying to do a study and It's about this and that, but you don't really tell them you are looking at them washing their hands. And you try to see if actually they'll be washing their hands. But in a moment when you tell them that the study is about washing your hands, and I'm trying to measure if you wash your hands, they know that's what you are doing. And they will always wash your hands. So even in research, we have something we call the Hawthorne effect, which simply means there are times that little deception is allowed, and it has to be approved by the ethics committee in respect to your project. But aside that, ethics and research has been an issue. For instance, you look at the COVID-19, you look at the vaccination, especially when people were now beginning to sell it, people were now beginning to make it something like a business. And most of the time, when this happens, the people that suffer are the harmless places, those living in a village, those that they are experiencing systemic barrier. And the moment you talk about systemic barrier, you are talking about disability barriers. Because in the concept of disability, there are three main types of disability model. There is the medical model, which says that, okay, you are disabled because you have a condition. There is a social model which is, okay, you are not disabled because you have a condition. You are disabled because the environment is not helping you with your condition. So the disability is not because of the medical condition. The disability is because of your environment. For instance, let's say you're walking to a place and let's say the person uses a wheelchair and there is a ramp. Sorry, there's a staircase, but there is no ramp. Now, medical model will say you are disabled because you are physically impaired. The social model will say, no, you are not disabled because you are physically impaired. You are disabled because there is no ramp and there's just a staircase. Then there came the International Classification Functioning, the ICF, which starts with the biopsychosocial model we use to connect your medicine with your social life. So they believe that, okay, you are disabled because it's true, you are physically impaired, but that's not the reason. The environment is not having a route for you to access that thing. So that becomes a systemic barrier. So you realize around all these, when there's the outbreak of a pandemic, and then vaccinations are being given, and we begin to commercialize it, we create systemic barriers. And it's always the case that people in the power or the upper positions now begin to take advantage of those in the lower system. Now look at COVID-19, you would realize that people that are elderly and were staying at home suffered. And the reason is that we believe that they weren't important because we believe that we needed to do many works to be productive, and maybe wasting time on them is not going to help. And we ended up losing many of them. So when you speak about ethics, it's one of the big issues that we still have literature gaps in. And there's been a lot of research on trying to understand ethics as far as research is concerned. The only funny thing is that always and always there is this kind of breach in ethics as far as research are concerned. But I believe in order to settle this, we have to make sure our editors in journals, we have to make sure our people that are in charge of these journals are doing their work well. They are making sure before you do something, ethics are they are right. You've done your ethics, and they are not looking at the fact that you have money or you don't have money. Because the moment we look at money, then we are trying to say that those in higher systems, those in the top systems, in the high class system, will always have a way to do things because they believe that they have money. And at the end of the day, the people that are marginalized suffer, and it doesn't help us.
And we're all interconnected, right? Because, like we started the
Exactly.
beginning with epidemiology, especially as it relates to things like cholera or things
Yeah.
like, or the emergence of different pandemics, it
Mhm.
actually makes us collectively in a less well off system. It's worse.
Yeah.
The diseases can still travel across these economic stratospheres. One of the things I've been reflecting on as I've been seeking to get a deeper understanding of occupational apartheid and directly from the source of, and I was learning now that Ghana is in Western Africa. So it's definitely a distinct cultural context. Learning more about occupational apartheid, often that I think because the word apartheid is so stirring, and it does, a lot of us have recent like living memory of growing up in bearing witness to the atrocities that occurred. And in the United States, we have similar historic context as it relates to Jim Crow laws, the Civil Rights Amendment, the Civil War, that created social infrastructures that were inherently inequitable as it
Yeah,
relates to policy and social systems. Just like
yeah,
we were saying before, oftentimes in our academic departments, we'll separate the social sciences from the biomedical
yeah.
sciences. And what I'm preparing to make one of my next Tic Tacs on is where I feel recently I've gone through occupational apartheid as it relates to the American Occupational Therapy Association Code of Ethics, in
Okay.
illustrating that occupational apartheid really it doesn't need to be a controversial perspective, because really it is calling us into acknowledging the existence of social disparities and inequities that are built into our human social systems. And what I'm preparing to also make an argument for, and I'll start to share here too, is I feel that acknowledging the construct of occupational apartheid and Dr. Ramagundo's contribution of occupational consciousness and collective occupations, to me, it actually, I think you can make a fair argument that perspective is actually necessary for scientific integrity as well. So, not just ethical
Yeah,
integrity, but also scientific integrity, because if we don't critically reflect on who is being regarded as possessing human rights, along with the different disparities that are built into our contemporary human health infrastructure that is often
mhm,
informed by colonial imprints, not just in the
yeah,
US, also
yeah,
worldwide,
yeah,
it would inherently compromise our scientific inquiry by pre-biasing the results. And one of the examples of that I will say, so I have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And much of the research about attention deficit hyperactivity disorder that took place after I was born really focused on largely Caucasian young boys that were disrupted in space classrooms. So, as such, our lens psychosocially that went into understanding the origins of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder got artificially biased, and thus resource investment as well, towards a demographic without taking into account the nuances that might be different within women or might be different amid communities of color. And as I share this, one of the contexts that I want to weave in, kind of the basis of some of my field work research, has been very informed by developments in implementation science, which I'm sure you're connected with as well. That's been another focus for the Gates Foundation, which what they find in trying to get evidence and data to translate to public health infrastructure internationally, you also have to take into account and be culturally mindful to avoid how these systemic biases can actually compromise the evidence being able to inform the
yeah,
effective care and impactful care. I
yeah.
thought maybe you would be in an ideal position to speak to why being aware of disparities in our social systems would actually be essential to scientific integrity, not just ethical integrity.
Okay. Thank you very much. So you see, Dr. Josephine, the key thing is integration. That's the key thing. We live in a system where people believe that when they do something, and maybe due to the work that they do, due to how brilliant they are, they wouldn't want to have anything to do with teamwork. But when there is teamwork, everything becomes easy. When there is teamwork, we don't experience issue. Now, for instance, look at COVID-19. Now, assuming we have the scientists doing the medical field, we have the social scientists doing the community level, we have the epidemiologists coming to also look at the community level, and all this coming together with their findings, coming together with our next steps, making sure that they are integrating the community people. Because when it comes to research and it comes to scientific and social scientific stuff, you have to make sure that you engage the community. You don't just provide for them. You need to know what they are saying, because most of the times what you believe will be the best solution for them will not be their solution, because at the community level, you're not just looking at the elite, you're looking at the layman people. You look at the people that are not really quote and unquote brilliant. You look at the people that have not really gone to school. And most of the times, these people, they do not joke with their culture. They don't joke with it. I remember there was a research that was going on, and the researchers, they were supposed to build a certain structure that will help the people to get water. Here we call it a borehole. And they were trying to look at what they can do that they will use to get this borehole for the community or for the people. And what they did was that they did not ask the people, where do you need it? Why do you need this borehole? Why do you need it? Why should we even do it for you? They just went, got the money, and just built a borehole for them. They came back years later and they realized that the borehole that they did for this community, they were not using it. And the place had become bushy. And they were trying to understand, why are these people not using it? They went to ask the leaders, and the leaders said, how do you expect us to use a borehole which have been made on top of our God? So why weren't using it? Because the place that the researchers built the borehole was a place that in their culture they go there to worship the one they believe in. So most of the times in doing research, we need to integration. We need to integrate. We need to make sure that the scientist is coming together with the social scientists, because I cannot do a research in Ghana and apply that same research in US. Difference in culture. And we call that cultural understanding. We call that university of culture. You need to understand why they do their things and how they do their things. And I believe that has been one of our issues, even researchers. We live in a generation where we cannot come together. It's very hard for us to come together to have one common goal, and we do not believe that everybody should be a part of the issue. We do not want to take somebody's output. We just believe that what we are doing is the best, and that's the only thing we want to do. And at the end of the day, we go to the communities and we help them, thinking that we've provided help, but to them, they weren't helped. We just came to do what we wanted to do. They were never involved. Their needs were never met. And that is the reason why, as occupational scientists, as social scientists, as whoever we believe we are, we need to come together. We need to come together. We need to make sure that whatever you are doing, because the thing is that anything that we study can be applied anywhere. If you are doing mechanical engineering, you can apply in telecom engineering. You can apply in sociology. You can apply it in law. Everything is interconnected. And I truly believe that we are able to come together and we are able to do things together, we wouldn't have issues. And we live in a situation where, because we do things on our own, most of the times we do research for people and they are not happy. We do things for the community and they are not happy because we don't involve them. We assume for them and we think what we are doing is what they need. Whilst that's not even what they need. And I believe this is what we need to do to make sure we can come over these kind of issues.
I love that so much. And that's a huge part of the mission. And that I'm so grateful for you joining me
Thank
here
you.
and demonstrating and being role models of communicating across disciplines and across borders and utilizing technology as assistive supports for having impactful outcomes for public and individual and social health in the field. And that's why, if you're listening to this as a student, an occupational therapy assistant, an master's level OT, doctorate level OT, or even just somebody who's received occupational therapy, or somebody that's just interested in this process, like you're saying, there's room for everybody and everybody's zone of excellence and expertise, and the need to translate our science and our practice to be culturally mindful, culturally humble, and receptive to what is going to be accessible. I think that this speaks to the power that occupational science and occupational therapy can feel confident
Yeah,
about
yeah,
contributing to public health context, because not only do we, whether you're at the associate's, bachelor's level, we're exposed uniquely in the rehab triad to transformative social science perspectives. Advocacy is baked right into the AOTA Code of Ethics. Internationally, WFOT really affirms OT's role in systemic transformation, advocacy, working on our contributions to things like climate crisis and responding to pandemic issues. So, this is an area that if you start to engage with and incorporate the lens of occupational science, no matter where you practice, which exists independent of clinical pathology, so that allows the lens to look more broadly about how humans human together and how we can optimize well-being and liberation and transcending these harmful power infrastructures that we have. We do have that common cause to join together. And my hope is that from showing and demonstrating how we can cross these divisions and barriers, uplift and support each other's research and practice application, I think that's going to help occupational therapy, occupational science be more publicly known. But we have a chance to be leaders in partnering and demonstrating that there doesn't have to be a bitter rivalry between the social sciences and the biomedical sciences. When we have that rooted goal of preserving life, upholding human rights and basic liberties, all
Yeah,
of us can play a really active role, and we could actually, I believe, create more economically robust health and human service infrastructure and industry, because when people are healthy and collaborative, they tend to be more productive. They pretend to
that's
have
true.
less burnout,
That's
fatalities,
very true.
all those things. So, by humanizing each other and engaging with science differently, allowing for context and for all of our different cultural nuances to matter, it makes me so motivated and happy about what we can do about these crises that we're navigating.
Yeah,
I'm curious,
yeah,
epidemiology. I imagine that there's some times where that could feel bleak, or you might come across like challenging information. I'm curious, how do you find sources of optimism, inspiration amid sometimes studying kind of darker things?
yeah. That's very true. When it comes to optimism, it comes to inspiration, I believe in momentum. And when I say momentum, what I mean is, you see, first of all, you need to love yourself. That's the most important thing. That's the first of all. If you don't love yourself, you can't do anything. So that is key. And the other thing is that there should be a reason why you are doing what you are doing. For instance, when it comes to momentum, you have a goal, you have something you want to achieve. That is your goal. Now, what will keep you on fire or will keep you on purpose is the momentum. That is the force. That is the speed. When you don't have that momentum and you lose that momentum, it's very difficult to build because you don't have a reason for doing what you are doing. And there is no love in doing what you're doing. So when it comes to me, my momentum has always been my father. That's
Mm.
basically to me. And the reason is that is because of how I was with him. And currently he's dead. May he so rest in perfect peace. But he has become the reason why I do what I do. Because sometimes you are doing data, sometimes you're doing research analysis, and sometimes it can be tedious. Sometimes you're working with people and you're working with people from different backgrounds. They're all having different cultures. They were all raised differences. You can't apply what you were, how you were treated at home to apply it to them. We need to have a mutual agreement. And that's sometimes a difficult aspect of research work. But when you have a momentum, like me that I have my father, he's the reason why I do all that I do, you never stop because you believe that you are doing this because of somebody. You're not doing this because of yourself. Because some of the times when you just do something because of you, and there are times you will be tired. There are times you might want to give up. But when it comes to the moment where you want to give up, the question is, who is carrying you? Who is the reason why you are doing what you are doing? Who is the reason why, even when you are tired, you don't want to give up? Who is the reason why when you go for data collection and The participants say no, they won't give you information. No, they don't want to be part of it. When you have to change your study designs, you have to change the study sampling, you have to change the study setting, you have to read plenty articles, you have to find a gap in literature. All these are not just small stuff. It takes time. If you want to do a good research, you need good sampling. If you want to do a good research, you need to find a literature gap. Now, some of the time, these things can be quite tiresome. You might get tired. How can you move on? You need a momentum. You need to love yourself. That's the most important one. And there should be someone who is the reason why you never wants to give up. And that's what keeps me moving on, especially my father. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. And that I can really resonate with that in my own short story I've shared on this podcast before. Before I really committed to going into occupational therapy, I noticed that we actually had quite a few things in common from undergrad context, or at least part of why I have a podcast is because one of the most meaningful and important occupations for me, especially particularly when I was in high school, is I finally found a really creative outlet and a way of finding my voice through speech and debate. I got an opportunity
Yeah.
to develop in relation to public speaking. And partly from
Yeah.
that, I was really focused on governmental advocacy in my early high
Wow.
school days. And I studied governmental advocacy in most of my undergrad. And I think we were both very involved in student
Yeah.
governance, which I've noticed
Wow.
in a way like for the audience to know too, because I think you're currently in your studying your master's, right? This is the
Yeah.
research you're doing.
Yeah.
You're doing
Yeah.
this really broad, incredible epidemiology research on the cutting edge as a
Yeah.
master's student. So just
Yeah.
listening to this right now, you should know that Emmanuel is on the CSOS board as a master's
Yeah.
level student. So you don't need a doctorate to do this stuff. You don't need it to
That's
participate it.
true.
And
That's true. That's
you
true.
don't need to actually a degree at all to engage in
Yeah. Yeah.
policy and governmental
Yeah.
advocacy. In the US, we have occupational therapy as a profession because we aligned with the disability rights and disability justice movements. And our
Wow.
clients are systematically excluded from spaces like higher
Wow.
education. We still have really significant disparities in higher education in terms of who gets to access, participate, and succeed. We don't have infrastructure for inclusive education as robust as K through 12 in the United States. For higher education doesn't have as much infrastructure to be inclusive and empowering for people with disabilities. There's all sorts of literature on this, for example. But I wanted to I ended up committing to occupational therapy after my cousin Libby died, Libby Chikwanda, and her father was from Zimbabwe. So I grew up with my cousin who had a pretty severe chromosomal condition called Rett syndrome. But that's really living in her honor. My dream was to have a world where her and I could have aged in place together, that we could have grown, and that she would receive high quality, humanizing care. Right now in the US, we have a service cliff. After young adults with disabilities turn 21, we don't really have public health infrastructure adequately to support the occupational well being for young adults. So, sharing that, like her passing, I do believe that our grief can sometimes really carve a path forward to our most
Yeah.
deepest wisdom. I do believe, and I've been learning a lot from Dr. Cronenberg's work too, about having an active relationship, not just with our
Yeah.
dreams and what we want from the future, but also connecting with the wisdom of our ancestors. And that's
Yeah.
really, I think, connected across everybody worldwide. It's an important thing to be connected to that.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
I'm
That's very
curious.
true.
I know for those that, just for folks to know that Emmanuel actually, he also offers motivational speaking. Those that really respond well to his contributions and his inspiring development, I highly recommend checking that out. I know I've gotten to connect with you on LinkedIn. I'm curious if you're
Oh
open to
yeah.
sharing how people can continue to connect with your work and how you might suggest people considering connecting to CSOS internationally. I've joined as a member of CSOS CSOS as a member in the United States, in part because they have been
Oh, wow.
offering virtual offerances. I've been an activist in the OS community advocating for more
Yeah.
virtual knowledge sharing options because I believe that there are
Yeah.
significant access barriers to our international conferences. Many times,
Yeah.
occupational science conferences, just the entry fee alone can be
Yeah.
exceed the annual salaries of global south
Yeah.
occupational therapists. That's a
Yeah.
big part of investing in CSOS is they're making virtual knowledge translation events available. How do you recommend
Yeah.
getting involved and how can we connect to your work?
All right. Thank you very much. First of all, once again, thank you. What I'll say is that, dear listener, wherever you are listening to me, nobody will know that great capacity within you if you don't step out from your comfort zone and come out. You have the ideas, you have what it takes. You never know, maybe that idea that is in your mind is what will change the world to the next phase. And if you just keep it without sharing it, we will never know. We will never know. And that is the reason why I believe in the power of LinkedIn. I believe in the power of the virtual world. Through the virtual world, we are able to cut across barriers when it comes to countries. We're able to speak to each other without any barriers when it comes to social barriers because we can see each other and we can share ideas. So wherever you are, you have the idea. If you don't speak it, we won't get to know. If you don't bring it out, we won't know what you're thinking. You might be thinking that, okay, what I'm going to say will not make a difference. You will never know unless you try. You'll never know unless you try. I was just a student that's just coming wanting to do the postgraduate studies in Western University. I had to stop because of my dad's death because I wanted to take care of my mom. But even due to that, I realized that shouldn't stop me. I need to share my ideas. So during conference, when Dr. Lin will ask for Dr. Showers who has something to say, I'll say something. I was in the midst of a meeting with professors, with people in a certain high caliber, but that should not stop me from sharing what I believe can contribute. We are not looking at how perfect you are. We are not looking at how perfect you are. We are looking at your effort. We just want you to make an effort. We just want you to say something. That is all that we are looking at. Don't be scared. Don't be afraid that you get it wrong. If you don't get it wrong, you will never know what to do to make it right. If you don't get it wrong, you will never know what to do the next time. And you never know, maybe the next time when you get it will be in front of a big population. But probably if you had said it at the earlier stage, you'd have been corrected. And in the big populace, you'd have had a good effect on them. So always share your opinion, share your idea. What matters is how you share what you want to share. That is all that matters. And make the effort. And wherever you are listening to me, try best to be a part of CSOS. It cuts across international borders. Just share your ideas. When you hear of conference, submit yours. You say, just be a part of it. And be on LinkedIn because we believe and we live in a world where LinkedIn is becoming one of the most important tools for connecting with people. And the funny thing was that I actually knew about your work before you joined CSOS because I saw you on LinkedIn. Yeah, and I had already sent you a LinkedIn request. Then I realized, oh, okay, Dr. Josephine is coming to the podcast and Cousin coming to the conference. I'm like, oh, this is the same doctor that I sent a request. And through that, I was reading about your work. If it wasn't for LinkedIn, I wouldn't have gotten to know you. So I believe in LinkedIn. If you want to connect with me wherever you are, it's just Emmanuel Bodiampoma. Connect. Let's talk. Let's show. Remember, we need to integrate. We need to come together. And you should always share your effort. Don't forget, we are not looking at how perfect you are. We're just looking at the effort that you're trying to make. Thank you.
Oh, I love that so much. And really, I it's been somewhat of a struggle for me actually to find occupational scientists that are willing to come on. So this shows our mutual empowerment across borders and
Yeah.
across contexts occupationally and our ability to empower each other and to be in partnership and to illustrate that science is an occupation that really we want everyone to be involved in and we want everybody to feel empowered by. Oftentimes, our more elitist structures, this is how we can participate through occupational consciousness and acknowledging
Yeah.
occupational apartheid, we can empower ourselves to do differently and to
Yeah.
work across these systems of separation by creating integration, creating collaboration, and imagining new possibilities for the future, guided by the wisdom
Yeah.
of our ancestors and the optimism of
Yeah.
our future dreams. We're here
Yeah.
showing that this is an opportunity accessible to you. I'm hoping that I have listeners that are also OT educators at the occupational therapy assistant level, the
Yeah.
master's level, and
Yeah.
doctorate level. If you have a unit coming up that's looking at public health, if you've maybe never heard of occupational science before, or you want to inspire your students to dream bigger, I highly recommend connecting to Emmanuel on LinkedIn, following his
Thank
work,
you
and
very
inviting
much.
him to participate in your classrooms with virtual lectures. This is how we break down those barriers. This is how we
That's
increase
true.
scientific literacy. And this is how we work together to liberate each other and create a
Yeah.
world where we are occupationally well and our science serves us more than separates us. With
That's
that,
true.
do you have any closing thoughts that you would like to share with the community? And I just want to share your gratitude for coming on the podcast and help me relaunch it into 2026.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. First of all, it's such a privilege and honor to be here, and I really appreciate your patience. I think we're supposed to have this 2 weeks ago. Yeah, but I really appreciate
For
your
both of
patience to
us.
exactly. Yeah, I really appreciate your patience and for inviting me on board to share what I believe in. And what I will say to anybody listening to me is again, make the effort. Some of the times when you want to be perfect, you end up trying to look for the right condition. But the truth is that there is not really a right condition. There will always be an issue somewhere. There will always be an issue somewhere. So just make the effort. Don't wait to have a perfect weather, have a perfect condition before you do what you have to do. Just take a step. Don't wait to have all the resources available. Don't wait to have, there's somebody listening to me. You have an idea, you want to start, and you are telling yourself, maybe if I get this tomorrow, I can start. If I get that, then I can start. How sure are you that when you get what you're looking for, there will not be another question to get another thing? So start with what you have. Make the effort. Share your ideas. Speak on social media. Just be careful with how you say what you want to say. And just make the effort. And you're all good to go. And irrespective of your background, respect people. Irrespective of your academic background and your profession, respect people. Understand that we need everybody to be on board and we need to come together with our knowledge, come together with experience and serve the nation and be the best for our nation and even for the generation that is to come, even after us. Thank you so much.
Oh, lovely so much. And I love that reminder too. Something that I'm hoping that my work and your voice can share too is reminding that science is something that we engage in experimentation. We get out there and we try it and
Exactly.
we aim to fail most of the time because we learn more from that.
Yes.
And we have to try
Exactly.
to design or experience ideally almost to fail in of themselves because you want to see what kind
Yeah.
of comes out of it. And I think we forget
Yeah.
that because we look at controls and standards and all those things. And occupational science, I think it gives us that permission to engage in scientific inquiry in a way that accepts the messiness of everyday life. And I
Okay.
believe in citizen and open science. And that's a big value for me in this podcast effort is to also empower
Mhm.
OTPs and clinicians across the field to realize that when you're engaging with your clients and you're testing a hypothesis in lifetime, that is part of how we have science translate. And even just breaking down these ideas and getting a sense of these bigger words and figuring out how to translate them into everyday language, that is an important part that you're playing as a field clinician at whatever level it is. You're part of this global scientific enterprise. And through occupational science, you're also part of our social science efforts of humanizing and breaking down barriers barriers. I hope that you as listeners feel empowered by this and welcome to join this conversation. And part of that can be also learning about the terminology so that you feel like you have an opportunity to be an empowered part of the conversation. So from that, I hope that you can join both me and Emmanuel on LinkedIn, which I'll get set up. Please feel free
Yeah.
to follow this Substack. I'm now producing TikToks and on Instagram and on Facebook, the OS Alphabet series. So even if occupational science was left out of your entry level OTP curriculum, we can make up for that. We can make up for that. And your ability to understand and integrate the science is going to be so well served by your time in the field. Learning new words doesn't make anything that you were doing before wrong or bad. It just opens up new possibilities, new considerations, and new lenses that help expand what impact your work can have and understanding your clients through different lenses. Even though it can somewhat feel overwhelming, navigating burnout and saying, oh, there's another thing I need to learn, having these opportunities I found can actually be really instrumental to addressing burnout, because burnout often comes where we don't have that sense of purpose and we don't have that sense, we view policies as barriers and punishments rather than as tools that we can use to liberate. I feel very passionate that if you get exposed to this wonderful body of work and this terminology, it has the power to empower you, your clients, and help you find a new state of existing as a clinician where you feel empowered, scientifically grounded, and ethically fortified by these possibilities. This could be the best opportunity yet. With these systems falling apart means that we have some opportunities to build new things together that can be in deeper alignment with our values. So thank you so much for joining today. Manuel, thank you so much for your grace with me as well. And I look forward to staying in
Thank
touch
you.
over time. Always feel free to reach out if you have work that you want help disseminating, and we can help grow literacy of OS together. That's what this is for.
Thank thank you so much.